Lord Litagodon, it says the new controversial glitch in Zelda OOT any percent speedrun. You should watch it, Forsen Scoot. A controversial glitch? A new
Hello,
one?
you absolute legends. At the beginning of 2020, the world record for beating The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was 16 minutes and 58 seconds, held by the Swedish speedrunner Torje. By the end of January, the world record had been obliterated, being lowered to 9 minutes and 59 seconds, held by the American runner Lazoots. The obvious question is, how on earth can you beat Ocarina of Time in 10 minutes? That seems impossible. The answer is somewhat controversial, and has sparked debate about what beating a game even means. Does it mean defeating a final boss? Is the only requirement for the end screen to show up? People are divided on what should classify as a true completion. The world record for beating Ocarina of Time was already ridiculously low, at just under 17 minutes, so obviously some trickery was involved. You couldn't possibly expect someone to visit every dungeon and collect every item in 17 minutes. The old strategy involved warping from the Deku Tree, the very first dungeon in the game, all the way to the very end, just before the climactic fight with Ganon. While players were skipping most of the game's content, at least they actually killed the story's antagonist, which seemingly resolves the plot, albeit in a very creative way. But the new strategy involves forcing the game's end screen to appear prematurely, mimicking the end result, without having to defeat the final boss. And given the fact that the current record is so brief, this can obviously be done very, very early in the game. The glitch that was discovered is nothing short of amazing, and is so technical, so strange that I have absolutely no idea what is going on. This is even after I've watched explanations. I think Ocarina of Time may be getting to the point where it is so broken that only the most educated speedrunners will understand what is happening on screen during these records. Time will tell if this ends up being a good or a bad thing for the game. In this video we will take a look at the new strategy, and at least try to wrap our brains around it. Once you have an idea about what goes on during the new record, you can form your own opinion about how the run should be categorized. Should this new glitch be separated into its own category? Should this even be considered as beating the game? Let's take a look.
Alright, show me.
The record for beating Ocarina of Time as quickly as possible has always been pretty broken. Though broken as it may be, it was still a respected speedrun and has facilitated some of the most iconic records of all time. In order to get some context and contrast, I will first briefly cover the old strategy. I want to understand why a run like Narcissa Wright's 1810 is considered one of the greatest speedruns of all time, while the new records are considered by some to be lifeless and boring, despite being only a few minutes faster. The thing that used to make Zelda speedruns so short was the wrong warp that enabled players to go from the Deku Tree straight to Ganon's Tower, right before the final boss fight. The warp itself is pretty technical, and even though I performed it myself, I still don't know all of the nitty-gritty details about why it works. What I do know is that in order to execute the glitch you need a bottle, and something that can be stored inside of the bottle. This could be a fish or a bug's, but it needs to be something that can be released and recollected.
I know this already.
Back in 2004, head to the Deku Tree to perform the wrong warp. The wrong warp requires a blue warp zone to work, which appears after specific movement that changes some inner values. You can exit the room via the door and appear in Ganon's castle. After heading to the base of the tower and watching it collapse, the only thing left to do is to defeat Ganon in a final showdown to save Hyrule and complete the game. Yes, the run was short, but it had structure and a climax that gave it a satisfactory conclusion. Over the next couple of years, new strategies were developed that enabled you to get a bottle inside of the Deku Tree. With these discoveries, it meant that you wouldn't even need to leave Kokiri Forest at all, as the only point of this previously was to collect the bottle. This, in my opinion, is where Ocarina of Time began to lose some of its magic. While the run's length wasn't dramatically shortened, with the new route being around a minute faster, it lacked any of the sense of adventure the previous route offered. Even though it was only for a brief time, the fact that we got to leave the forest, head down Zora's River and out onto Hyrule Field gave the run enough diversity to make it enticing to viewers. Collecting chickens might seem pretty mundane, but at least it was a change of scenery that gave us a break from the...
I don't like that this guy is implying that the any percent run is the most prestigious run, or should always be the most prestigious run in any game. There are several speedruns where 100% is more prestigious than any percent, and like some other category is more prestigious than any percent, and sometimes any percent is the most prestigious category. But this guy is just assuming that any percent must be prestigious because it was in the past. But if they find a way to break it so that you don't have to play the last boss, or that you skip to the end screen somehow, then people are just gonna say, "Oh, this is the best category now," instead of any
green
percent.
and brown tones we
But
see
he just wants to
and
keep
the town's
on
music gave us a greater sense
keep
of
the
nostalgia.
80%.
Without leaving the forest, the grand nature
very
of the game is
respectable.
minimized and forgotten. But at least we still had a climax, and Ganon still needed to be defeated, though even this has now been stripped away. On the 15th of January, Mr.
Can you not
Cheese
show it
uploaded
instead?
a YouTube
Okay, here we
video
go.
titled Ocarina of Time, Kokiri Forest Credits Warp, RTA Viable N64 version. RTA Viable simply meaning that it would be able to be performed by a human in a regular speedrun. The video is really bizarre to watch, and nothing that is happening seems to make any sense. But at the end of a very lengthy setup, the game mysteriously fades out and the credits begin. Though it must be pointed out that the credits don't start from the beginning, but rather midway through. In December, I covered the new Moonwarp in Majora's Mask, which made use of a technique called Stale Reference Manipulation, or SRM for short. This centered around the way you can manipulate the game by getting Link to carry an unloaded object. This is used in the new strategy as well, but the setup to perform the warp is much more complicated.
How the fuck did you find
In order to execute
this?
the new warp, we need two items, an ocarina and the slingshot. Obtaining the ocarina is easy. We get it automatically when we leave Kokiri Forest and meet Saria on the bridge. Again, this normally isn't possible to do without getting the medallion from the Deku Tree, but there is a very simple way to get past the guard that blocks the exit.
Yeah, okay, you
Once
don't have
the
to
new
tell
ocarina
us
has
these
been
things.
obtained, we make our way into the Deku Tree to get the slingshot. Getting these two items now takes up the bulk of the speedrun. As soon as we leave the Deku Tree with the slingshot in our possession, the setup for the credit warp begins. What follows is a 2-minute long sequence of seemingly random movements and glitches that eventually leads to the game fading out and the credits beginning. The trick hinges around the way you can manipulate the game's code by getting Link to hold an unloaded object, but this isn't the easiest thing to do. After some setup, a crawl space and sign are used to perform a glitch that locks the camera in place. Using the ocarina refocuses the camera, but as soon as the ocarina is put away, the camera returns to the same position. The idea here is to pick up a particular rock, but have it be unloaded by the retreating camera. Rocks automatically unload if the camera is a certain distance away.
I wonder if
so
every
it shouldn't
one
be
of
possible
these
to pick one up when the
movements are
camera is
actually
where
like
it is.
pixel
However, we
perfect
can
or
use the
not.
ocarina to bring
Or
the
if it's
camera
like
close,
roughly
load
here,
the rock,
it's fine.
then pick it up as the camera retreats back. With this method, the
The
rock can
sad
be
part
picked
is
up,
that
but by the time it's
it's
above Link's
probably
head,
pixel
it has
perfect.
become unloaded.
How
We
the
then
fuck
walk
did he
Link
think-
to the
how the
loading
fuck did
zone
you
between the
come
main
up with
section
this?
and the Deku Tree. This returns the camera back to normal, allowing the rest of the setup. Again, there are seemingly random movements performed in order to set inner values, including aiming the slingshot at a very specific location. Once everything has been set up, we load a specific rock near the crawl space we used earlier, then press a combination of buttons on the first and third controllers. Yes, this required a controller to be plugged in into the third controller port and buttons pressed on both controllers.
Oh, so then it's not legit because it's like the golden eye thingy where they had a second controller and they took out the frame of the controller and they pushed down like a lot of buttons at the same time or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was not viable. You weren't allowed to do it.
Simultaneously. This would cause the game to void out and the credits to begin. Furthermore, this can only be performed on the Japanese version of the game, as the file name needs to contain a very specific set of characters. In the
Really?
description, I'll put a link to a video from Glitches and Stuff that explains the glitch in greater detail. Obviously, I've barely scratched the surface of this trick, and honestly it would take too long in this video to explain everything, so definitely check that video out if you want to know more. I have no idea how people learned this so quickly, but it didn't take long for the record to be lowered after Mr. Cheese released his video. Less than 24 hours later, the speedrunner Lazoots used the new technique to finish the game in 13 minutes and 48 seconds. But this was only the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, Lazoots would repeatedly lower his own record, down to 11 minutes and 51 seconds, set on the 29th of January. This latest record used a slightly more optimized setup that more resembles a classic wrong warp. Instead of the credits appearing after the rock was loaded and the correct buttons pressed, it occurs after entering one of the huts. This also didn't need the third controller to be plugged in either, making it much less annoying and more accessible for those with only one controller. On the 31st of January, the game was broken even further, when the runner Blinny posted a video demonstrating a way to pick up the rock without needing the Ocarina to zoom in the camera. In order to do this,
you do understand how a tool-assisted speedrun works, right? It's humans programming a script that the machine runs. It's just not possible to do yourself physically. They're giving the inputs to the machine in that order. It's not the machine thinking of the best way to do it. It's not an AI. It's people doing a script for a machine, right? Like a queue of inputs that they want the machine to do. So you cannot tell a machine to come up with the fastest way. It's not an AI, the task bot, right? Or am I wrong? I'm 90% sure that's how it works. I think I saw a video on it once or twice. Yeah, I'm right.
Separate glitch known as Return A is activated by pressing a specific button combination while being hit by a Deku Bubba. This locks the camera into position and forces it to follow Link at all times. Now, the previously mentioned glitch is performed again in the crawl space, but this time the camera continues to follow Link down to the rock we need to pick up. The glitch that is forcing the camera to follow Link can be cancelled by striking the rock with Link's sword, at which time the camera begins to zoom back to the crawl space. But luckily, there is enough time after the sword slash to pick up the rock before the camera retreats too far. With the rock collected, everything else is the same as it was in the previous version of the strategy. Skipping the Ocarina saved a huge amount of time, and the record was immediately lowered. The runner's save state managed to complete a run of 11 minutes and 18 seconds, but it wasn't long before Lazoots returned and smashed the record again, taking it down to 10 minutes and 16 seconds just a few hours later. He would continue to grind, as the 10-minute barrier was seen as an exciting goal to reach for. It really didn't take long to get there though, with Lazoots finishing a run in just 9 minutes and 59 seconds on the 1st of February. From here, it didn't seem like there was a whole lot lower the record could go, as the run was already so short and seemed pretty optimized. But alas, again, the game was broken further. On the 2nd of February, Mr. Cheese uploaded another video titled Ocarina of Time, any % slingshot skip, TAS only. Most of that title is self-explanatory, but the TAS only part is interesting. This implies that it is not feasible for a human to execute in a live run, and would be only possible in theory if you were to use tools that allow you to manually input the perfect controls frame by frame.
Told you. Manually input the perfect tools frame by frame.
This theoretical strategy used a different setup that would again use a third controller, which along with a...
But yeah, I don't think the third controller is allowed. What was the judgment of GoldenEye drama? It was like... I don't remember, it wasn't allowed. I don't know what they said though. That doesn't apply to every other game. Yeah, but imagine getting... Okay, so... Imagine getting, imagine stepping on your fucking Nintendo 64, right? You're like jumping on your Nintendo 64, and then you hit something that pushes something that creates a bug that gives you the world record, right? Like you can jump, you know what I mean? Like if you are at a certain place in game and you jump on it and like almost destroy it, and then it skips to the fucking credits or something. That wouldn't be a viable run, because then everyone would have to jump on their Nintendo 64 and like destroy your Nintendo 64, so there would be rules against it, right? There are certain ways you can fuck up runs by destroying your fucking hardware, right? But it shouldn't be allowed in any speedrun, in my opinion, because then everyone needs to buy a new Nintendo 64 every fucking round.
A couple of other button inputs requires a very specific value to be input by the joystick. This joystick value is precise down to the unit, which is essentially the smallest and most precise measurement the joystick can output.
Wait, the problem there was physically modification of the controller, not having two controllers, Forsen. I don't think they do anything like that here. Yeah, I don't exactly remember. I think they open up the front of the controller in the golden eye thingy and press down like 4 things at once or something.
Not just the direction that needs
which
to
made
be
like
correct, but also
stop,
the intensity.
which stopped
in
the
theory,
in-game
one
timer
could do
somehow.
100 runs and try to fluke the value, which I'm sure
and
someone
in that
would have
game
done.
you go by
But the runner
in-game
save
timer.
state had a different idea. He used a tool that would allow him to see the joystick input values, and then used sticky tape and cardboard to create his own custom notch. This notch would allow you to place the joystick in the correct position, eliminating the guesswork. With the notch in place, the input viewer could then be discarded, as the notch would always give the correct value. On the 3rd of February, SaveState used his makeshift controller modification to successfully pull off the credits warp without the slingshot or ocarina, and achieved a time of 9 minutes and 39 seconds. This is where things begin to get a bit controversial.
I don't like this.
The question that arises
Like,
is, should the use of an input viewer to get the correct value of the control stick before the run affect the legality of the record? Should the work done before the run begins be considered as part of the speedrun itself?
If you do that during a run,
should be allowed is also up
sure.
for debate. Speedruns that use in-game preparation aren't
But that's
inherently
impossible to
wrong
do
or
during
bad,
a run.
but they are usually classified as New Game Plus. Standard speedruns are generally considered to be runs that start from a completely clean slate. But with this new strategy, players have begun to use input viewers to set the value of the control stick beforehand. Since SaveState's initial record, the time has been taken drastically lower, now sitting at 8 minutes and 30 seconds achieved by Danny B. Again, this uses preparation and the use of an input viewer to set up the 3rd controller before the run begins. The Ocarina of Time speedrunning community will need to vote on what to do with these new runs, and if there are any new rules or restrictions that need to be implemented. In the meantime, the official record on speedrun.com remains at 9 minutes and 56 seconds by Lazoots. However, this will obviously change if the new runs are accepted. I really can't stress enough how intricate and
genius. Yeah, I don't understand how he found out. I wish he would tell us how he found out, the guy. Or maybe he did, I don't know. Like, how do you find something out that's like 2 minutes setup with random fucking not random but seemingly random inputs? It's so weird. Like, endless fucking combination. He said it in another video. The only way I can think of is yeah, reading the memory, but wouldn't that have been figured out already? If that's how people found shit out in ZELDA OOT? Maybe it's just so complex that you have to do a lot of trial and error, like really guess a lot of things. Probably. But yeah. Tay a whiny emnay.